12:37 it is. You are listening to the Mid Morning Talk on Slam Media with me, Mario Mokwanda. And we're going to be talking about understanding the importance of reading for literacy development with my guests, Fatuma Abdullah and Shafinaaz Hassim. Fatuma is a student of life and economics and business graduate, an award-winning author and entrepreneur. Today, she has self-published 5 children's books and a kids' travel journal. She is the founder and director of Akiki Distributors, a private company which manufactures and distributes Akiki dolls. And we have Shafinaaz Hassim, a sociologist and author based in South Africa. She writes both fiction and nonfiction. Her previous works in gender studies, fiction, and poetry have been commended by various awards, including the Salake Selodeka Award, the UJ Prize for Creative Arts, and the Minara Aziz Hassim Literary Award. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum to both of you ladies, and shukran for joining me.
Walaikum salam. Lovely to be on your show, Miriam.
Thank you for the invite. It's glad to be here.
Alhamdulillah. Well, with Shafinaaz, it's different because I mean you're always hosting books and authors, etc. And now I'm hosting you as a guest on my show, talking about books and reading and literacy, etc. So South Africa commemorates National Book Week every first week of September. It's an initiative of the South African Book Development Council, or SABDC, in collaboration with the Departments of Arts and Culture. Statistics report that only 14% of the South African population are active book readers, and only 5% of parents read to their children. Very shocking statistics there. I mean, it's lower than 20%, so definitely something that we need to worry about. Let us start first with the importance of reading. Why is reading so important?
I think that, in so many ways, reading is also about engaging social consciousness about matters around us. It's a way of transferring knowledge. It's a way of getting children to understand what the world around them and what's happening around them. But it's also a way of transferring our local stories, which we need more of. And when I hear stats, I mean, I know that the stats are reliable, but when I hear the stats and when we go out and actually get involved in reading programs with the schools, it's not that there isn't a thirst for story. It's not that there isn't a thirst for reading, but that it's about access to the material. And access is not only just about whether we have our work and our books out there, but about affordability. So there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had about affordability of books, because our kids want stories. They want to be read to. They want to read. It's just books in South Africa are quite expensive. So how do we change that dynamic?
Yes, I mean, books are quite expensive, which makes one reluctant to even want to pick up a book and buy. And we need to start some system of bartering and sharing books with each other so that, we can all get to read different types of genres or exchange our favorite genres, etc., etc. Fatuma, what are the benefits of reading?
Reading has got so many benefits. I mean, just even with my kids, just trying to get them to enjoy reading, because I think the first step is actually to get the children to enjoy reading, to enjoy listening to stories. That's why story time is so important. And I always say it has to start with the parents. If a parent is not reading a book, or if they're not buying books, there's no way you'll expect your child to pick up a book and just read, unless they're just tuned that way. But otherwise, in terms of starting with reading, it starts with story time. Parents always need to at least set some time. I always say, even if it's 5 minutes, just before you go to bed, or just on a Saturday, let's just have some time where we just sit down and either mom reads a book or dad reads a book. Or if the kids are older, you can just have like 1 hour quiet time. Everybody needs to get a book to read, because with reading, you open yourself to a lot of things. It's also vocabulary. You also open your understanding. I think there's a quote that says, books are either a mirror or a window. So mirror is when you're reading the book and you can see yourself in the book. And then also a window because you also understand other people's cultures. Reading brings a lot of empathy because then you understand you're not living in some sort of a bubble. There's a lot of stuff. And even for kids, their imagination can just run wild because you have fictional characters who fly, who do stuff. And that also, in terms of just building up character as well, I think that's why reading is so important.
Hmm. Now, from what age do we start reading to our children, Fatuma?
Uh, um, I've heard some moms who say they were reading from when the baby was in the tummy. So I met this lady once upon, and she said, "Yeah, no, I knew he would be a writer because the boy now writes books." But she's like, because I deliberately started reading to him when he was in my tummy. So even it's just like I even hear doctors, they say like when you play music and stuff to the baby, they kind of hear all these notes. And when they come out of the tummy and actually hear it, then it's something that's it's familiar. So the child tends to like it and gravitate towards it. So reading can start as early as, yeah, 9 months before you give birth, or just, yeah, as soon as the child gets out. Because, I mean, this is why we also sing lullabies to kids. It's just soothing. So, especially a mother who's just like, pick up a book and it can just be any type of story where you just start engaging your kids. And the more books you have around the house, the more probability a child will come up and just pick up a book because mommy's either reading or daddy's reading. So I think, yeah, you can start at any time. It's never too early, and also it's never too late.
Hmm. All right. This year's theme for National Book Week is the books of our lives. How can we best interpret this and eventually live by it? Shafinaz?
I just want to say it was so beautiful when Fatima used the metaphor of a book being a mirror or a window. I really, really enjoyed that. And so when we look at the theme for Book Week, um, we've just come through and we are still living through a pandemic, and so many children and so many people are dealing with the effects of this pandemic. Nothing's normal as we know it to be. And in many ways, the mirror has been held up to us just in the way that we've been living through life, interacting
Mm,
with each other, conducting ourselves around each other, dealing with grief and death and loss and the fear of
mm,
illness. Everything's changed. And reading and writing in that sense as well has offered this opportunity to process some of the trauma.
mm,
And so I think that on the one hand, I think that a book will find you exactly when you need it. And for some
mm,
people, solace is in the form of the scriptures, whether you're reading the Bible or the Quran. For some people, solace is in the form of entertainment, or reading about the pandemic, or reading about stories that take you away from the pandemic. And for
mm,
some people, it is about reading how to process grief. So when you talk of the book of life, it actually brings it closer to home. And I'm finding more people keeping a diary and writing about their day and understanding the finiteness of life and wanting to capture either moments and documents for themselves, or legacy for their families, writing memoir, writing family stories. And that's a way of both processing the trauma, but also saying, you know what, we're here for a reason. We want to leave something for the next generation. Life really is as short as you don't know if you're going to be around next week,
mm,
or next year for that matter. And so I think that understanding has also brought a greater appreciation for the moment, and appreciation for wanting to live life to the fullest,
mm,
and literacy, reading and writing and documenting your story has just become that much more urgent in a way. Engaging with text, making sense and finding meaning through writing. And even if it's just, I mean, we talk about writing as writers for publication, and it's
Hmm.
become this kind of grand thought, but it's also
mm,
about documenting a diary for yourself and for your family, if you don't
mm,
think that it's something that you want to share beyond your immediate sphere of influence. And I think that there's something to be had there. I encourage more and more people to take out your diary and make notes and write, or if you prefer to type out memoirs for the family, for yourself. It also brings a greater appreciation for how far you've come in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Now, Shafinaz, earlier on you mentioned that books aren't really affordable. So, how do we make books affordable, or how do we make them accessible for people who want to read?
We are seeing a greater impetus from independent publishers, and actually taking the initiative to go out into the communities and to do reading programs and to sit with the schools. But it is a labor of love. It's an expensive exercise, and I think that the state, the Department of Arts and Culture in particular, has a greater role to play and has a sense of responsibility towards communities, towards the nation, to create a greater kind of accessibility for our local literature in particular. You remember now when books are published overseas and you bring the stories in, I mean, we do need this material. They're printing in the millions, and so that brings down the cost factor significantly
Mm.
and makes these books far more accessible. And our local material, if given that same kind of traction in a way, funding, support, will be more accessible, so that we're not going in. I mean, we're all readers here. We love to read, but even I've got to think twice when I walk into a bookstore and say, I want to read these 5 new books this month. I've got to budget myself down to 3 for now. And so that's faced with households. If there's 5 children or 3 children in the household and
Mm.
you want them to read the latest, and a parent's got to think now, which one can we read for this month.
Mm.
And so it's really not about unwillingness. It's really about access. I truly believe that. um, and I hope that more organizations, and especially at the forefront, we need government to come in. I know the Department of Education does a big job of this, of trying to get local material into the public libraries, but we do need a greater force. There's a lot of people, even in our libraries, our outreach programs back in Limpopo. There's just such amazing energy as well, but they're all hamstrung by the lack of funding, and we do need government to see how important this is, to push for greater affordability, greater access in our city schools, in our rural schools, because our people are thirsty for stories. Our kids are thirsty for our stories, and this will engage greater writers in the future from amongst us. We have a wealth of oral history. We have a wealth of storytellers, and we need to put our energy behind them.
Hmm. Fatima, you write children's books. In fact,
Mm.
you have self-published 5 children's books. Are your books easily accessible?
Easily, Shafinaz put it very well. The cost of publishing a book locally is very expensive. So, I mean, it would be for the kids in the city, yes, they can afford, but it would be unfair if I went with the current cost of my book to a rural area, because then they wouldn't afford it. But because as a self-publisher, I've had to pay for the illustration, I've had to pay for all the graphics, I've had to pay for the printing. And given that I'm self-published, I'm not printing in the millions, so I can't afford also to, price them correctly. So yes, but Shafinaz also puts it very properly. If the government came to play, or even just the private sectors, in terms of just making the books accessible, if you support local authors and you're able to print in the bulk, then the books will be out there. Because for me, I think it's also very important for the kids to see themselves in the stories. And when they're local
Mhm.
stories, they're even more relatable, they're more engaging. And if I can recall, my son was reading a book about taboo, and I think Shafinaz had earlier said it's until you find the right book. For him, that was the right book. I had struggled with many books, Wimpy of the Diary Kid, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But when he got that one, he was so excited. But because Tabo almost sounded like a classmate who was doing stuff and also being naughty, and he was like, he really enjoyed that book. So, in terms of books being there, yes, they're there. The stories are there. There are plenty of stories. It's just the channel, the distribution channel. How do they get to the kids far and wide, both in the cities, in the townships, and also in the rural areas? Because true, even sometimes when you do readings in places that are previously disadvantaged, the kids are thirsty for the stories. They want the books, but we can only do so much. We need more people to come to the party, and in terms of putting it at the front of the agenda, that at least each and every child should have a book. And I think there's this thing of whereby you also have mobile libraries. So in a
Mhm.
rural area, you can have like a van with books, and kids come round. You go have them access the books, touch the books, enjoy the books, enjoy the readings. So it almost comes like a mobile library across the village. And then, of course, they need replenishing. So I think those are avenues that we can use, because now libraries, I think the last time I went to the library myself was ages back. And now also with the pandemic, it's one of those things that hasn't been easily accessible. So we need to come up with clever ways in terms of how to get the books to the children, and knowing that the different landscapes. It's not, I mean, within the private sector, yes, they can afford, and yes, they have access to books in the bookstores, but in the rural areas, how do you get it to them in the townships? And then also making it in a way whereby even if we put the books there, it doesn't look like our project, whereby you have to also involve the women in the community, so that they take ownership of these things and they start reading to the kids as well. They have a story time, they have a moment where they can read to the kids. So I think, yeah, it's a culture thing that we must entrench.
Hmm. All right. So many points that you've mentioned there, Fatima, as well as Shafinaz. Literacy reading is very important. And I'm still thinking, how am I going to get my child to read? Because she gets a book and she just wants to tear the pages. And I'm like, and then how are you going to read? You need to read, not tear the pages. And okay, but I'm like, okay, she's only 3, so eventually she'll get there. Will she get there?
She will, because the thing is, and for parents, one of the things which even my kids call me out on is consistency. So if I started reading at a certain time, and then on another day I'm feeling lazy or I don't want to, and then they're like, "So, mommy, are you going to read?" And I'm like, "Ugh, okay, okay, yeah, but I need to be consistent." So for them also, it kind of gets into a routine. Kids are good when there's a routine, because they know, okay, at this time, let's set apart, let's read a book, or mommy is going to read. So I mean, the challenge is on us now, the guardians and the parents, to ensure at least even in the home you create a culture of reading.
Mhm. All right. And Shafinaz, what are your final thoughts going forward?
I'm thinking of your little girl also, and I know, with children, colors excite them at this age,
Mm,
and the feel and the touch of a book as well. So if you cuddle and sit with them and you turn the pages together, they already associate reading as something loving, as quality time. And as Fatima said, when they see you reading, then they want to read, and that's for the older children as well. So inshallah, the love of reading will be a blessed magic that will pass down to your babies as
Ameen.
well. Um,
Ameen.
we will continue to do our best and hope that the energy is engaged in all the spaces. Usually at this time of the year, the National Book Week is celebrated in so many ways, with festivals and book programs and reading programs at the school. Stories are turned into plays around the country, and I know that the schools are still engaging in those things, but in many ways the literary spaces have, especially the physical meeting spaces, have stopped for a while. There
mm,
are small debating groups and small reading groups happening, and I know that book clubs are still trying to find ways to take it online. So there's these amazing little groups around the country of book clubs, that are really safe spaces of women getting together, reading and talking, and some of the groups are obviously non-gendered. And I find that that's also a wonderful movement, if you could say, of little pockets of readers that we connect with, or that come out looking for local material. So that's a really wonderful way of just connecting and getting in touch. And then these online programs have been carrying the wave of reading, even if for now we can't get together.
Mm.
And so there's a hope for the future. We'll just keep writing and keep reading, and carry it along in the best way that we can. And of course, thanks to all the media spaces for giving the opportunity to talk about literacy and our books and our writing.
Hmm. And I think going forward, we all have a role to play in terms of getting people to read more, getting our community to read more, our society to read more, especially if you can read. If you can read, you have a book, you have a copy of a book, children's books, adults book, whatever. Go out into your community and form a reading club or something. Even if it's only two people that attend, at least you'll be making a difference in two people's lives, and eventually
Mm.
it will grow. So that is my take on how we can commemorate and how each one of us can do our bit to improve our literary literacy in our schools as well as our homes and communities. Thank you to both of you for taking some time out to join me for this chat, and I wish you well in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair.
All right, have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. That was Fatuma Abdullah and Shafinaaz Hassim, both authors, taking us through National Book Week 2021, and the theme of this year is the books of our lives. And what does that theme mean to you, and how do you live by it? You know, everybody needs to do their bit, especially if you know how to read. Go and teach your neighbor, go and teach or go to a school, a local school, and start reading books, start reading stories, and encourage people to read, encourage more children, more kids to read, because as Shafinaz and Fatuma mentioned, that it's all about the accessibility. It's difficult for some kids to access books because of the expenses that are involved, and it's not easy. So everybody needs to do their bit, including government and private sectors. That is all that we have for you today. Please join me tomorrow from 11 to 1 right here on Slum Media. For your comments, questions, queries, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section or send them to WhatsApp on 061 0617660355. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah. Have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.